So I am just saying that we are given an assignment to do for cost and management accounting, and the due date is still ahead of us. It's just still ahead of us. It's on 31st of March 2024 at somewhere around 24 hours. That will be the due date. I have had time to analyze the question properly, and I should be quick to indicate that the first part of the question is coming from the topic called overhead costing. Okay, overhead costing. The first part of the question is overhead costing. And then the other part of the question, of course, this first part of the question is overhead costing. So then the other part of the question, that's starting from here after C, is from the topic called absorption costing and margin costing, and marginal costing. So basically what you're doing here, you are trying to compare between marginal costing or marginal way of accounting for the profits and losses and the traditional method, which is also called the full costing or absorption costing. We'll have a deeper conversation on these two as well so that you understand. So they are basically just the two topics in this assignment. I repeat, the first one is overhead costing. Once we do overhead costing and we do some examples, you will actually be able to do it on your own. And then we'll move on to the other part where we need to learn about absorption costing and marginal costing so that you can handle the later part of the question. So the whole idea or the whole plan is that you should be able to do the work on your own because you would have learned how to go about it. So what we want to discuss first of all is overhead costings in preparation for the first part of the question. So we do overhead costing. Yeah, that's what I want to communicate about. All right, so are you able to hear me? And are you following? Do you have any questions so far? Are you able to see the screen being shared?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for the response. So now, about overhead costing, okay? A little bit about overhead costing. You may be aware and follow nicely. We said that cost can be broken down and can be classified into different categories. But mainly the production cost is divided into, the prime costs, and the overhead costs. What is it that is under prime cost, or what forms the prime costs? Okay, so the prime cost is made up of number one, direct labor cost, follow nicely, direct labor cost, direct material costs, and the direct expenses. When you bring these three classes of the costs and put them together, you have what is known as the prime The prime costs. Okay, these give you what is known as the prime costs. Basically, the direct costs. The direct costs are those costs that you can properly attribute to the level of production or the product that is being produced. For example, direct labor is that labor that is directly associated to the product that we are producing, which actually could be a good or a service. It applies the same when we come to the direct materials. So direct materials are those materials that that we use to produce the product that we are producing. That is to say, a good or a service. Yeah. So when you look at all these direct costs, when you put them together, you make what is known as the prime costs. Then on the other hand, you have got the indirect costs. Okay. On the other hand, we have the what? The indirect costs. So that is to say, the indirect labor.
Yeah.
Hello?
I didn't get you on direct expenses.
Okay, so the direct expenses are basically the expenses that are incurred, and you can directly attribute them to the product or a service. So generally, all the direct costs can actually be attributed to the product or a service that you're producing. You got it?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So indirect material costs and the indirect expenses. Now, when you bring together all these indirect costs, those costs that you cannot directly attribute to the product that is being produced, being a good or a service, the collective name referring to these indirect costs is called overhead costs. Is that clear now? So when you say overhead costing or costing of overheads, we are referring to the costing of what? Of indirect costs. In short, we are learning how to account for those costs that we cannot directly attribute to the to the product being a good or a service that we are producing. That's the introduction. Any questions so far? You've known what the overhead costs are. Is there any question? So therefore, okay, thank you. So therefore, the total cost is just the sum of the prime cost plus overhead what? Overhead costs. So our focus is overhead costs this time around. Just want to, exert our attention and our efforts look at the product costs. Right.
So wait. These are overheads cost. Is it overhead? Yeah, overhead. Are they the costs that that cannot be traceable to the product? For example, the salary of the security guard.
Right.
Is this something like that?
Exactly. I've said by overhead, we mean all the indirect costs. Indirect labor, for example, you can pick an example of indirect labor. The salaries for the managers, salaries for the, who are these, the supervisors, those general workers, among others, right? Those salaries that are paid for the labor that we cannot directly attribute to the product. That's for labor, right? That's for indirect labor. You can still have indirect material. There are those material costs that you incur for the materials that you cannot really directly attribute to the product or service.
Sir, what of the production manager? Where does he or she fall?
The production manager, right? Yes, what does the production manager do? Maybe that should be the question.
No, as in, are they in the category of direct labor or indirect labor?
No, I'm asking, what does the product manager do? Can you attribute his work to a specific product? Does he directly, like his efforts, are they directly linked to the product that you're producing, or they are indirectly linked?
I think they are directly linked because they're in the what's this? They're in the position of the purchasing of raw materials, processing them into finished goods.
So what does a production manager do? Okay. Let me give you maybe a hypothetical example so that people can follow nicely. You see, for example, I'll give you the example from, the educational industry, because at least I've been in this for some time. You see, there is when you reach at the place at any school, there are lecturers, for example. Lecturers, they directly teach the reason why the university is existing is to research and teach, right? to research and deliver services through teaching. That's the main reason why the university should exist. So there are these lecturers that are directly involved in the service that you're doing. Like they are teaching and they're researching. Okay, follow nicely. Then beyond these same lecturers that you are seeing here, they have got people who are on top of them. For example, you have got the dean of students, right? The dean of the students of the whole school, maybe the dean of students humanities. He's sitting somewhere up there, from the dean followed by the HOD, the head of the department, maybe economics department. Under the HOD, there are these lecturers. I am just giving you this example. So we have got salaries that are paid to the lecturers, and we also have salaries that are paid, for example, to the dean of students. Okay. So now the question of the day is, amongst the two people, who is directly linked to the product that you're producing?
The lecturers, sir.
The lecturers are doing the work, right? They are handling the work. They are doing the actual work that is resulting into the product being produced. But these other ones, of course, their work cannot really be directly attributed, but they are in charge. They are supervising those people, like the supervisors, they're supervising the people who are doing the work. So those are indirect wages. Of course, their work is very important, but it's not directly attributed to the work that you're producing. Got it?
Yes, I'm now okay.
Mm-hmm. I can suspect that you missed the first lectures that we had under cost classification, because I think that's where all those questions should result from. They should have been settled during then. It is fine. Let's move on now and have the overhead costs. I've already defined the overhead costs, these indirect costs that you have. Okay. So now, whenever you have all these indirect costs, of course, I've said that the indirect costs can be classified now according to their functions. You can call them the production overheads. Those are the indirect costs that occur in the factory. Okay, they occur in the factory. Then administration overheads, they occur in the administration. There are these other indirect costs such as selling and distribution. They occur during the distribution. Okay, during the distribution of the product. Remember, when you produce whatever product of yours, you need to sell it to the people. But during distribution or during selling, you have to incur some indirect costs. So now those costs that you incur, they could be either labor, material, expenses, as long as they are not directly attributed. Then they can fall under selling and distribution overheads here. Okay, so that's the categorization or the classification that we are giving you for the indirect costs. They can be the production overheads, indirect administration overheads, and selling and distribution overheads. Right. A bit about the production overheads. For example, the production overheads that you could have as the fuel, right? The fuel that is incurred during the production process, the cost for that, protective clothing, depreciation of the non-current assets, and the supervision, supervising those people who are working. That's not a direct work, it's an indirect work, but it occurs in the factory. You have to supervise people in the factory too. So that's why we say it's an overhead. But for the service related, we can pick maybe an example of the cost of operating a non-production department that is, of course, within the factory, such as maybe the material handling of the materials, production control, the canteen services. Okay, right. So let me just give you an example. For example, when you come, for example, at the University of Zambia, we have a lot of things. We even have the canteen, right? when you look at that canteen, you know, the lecturer's canteen there by the School of Humanities, upstairs, the last floor there. Now, there is the work that happens in the canteen, right? And the cost that is incurred, right, in the canteen. So now there are those people that are working in the canteen. Would you say that the rent was paid, assuming that was just the rented area? Would you say that the work that the canteen guys is directly attributed to what we are existing for as a university? Would you say that? Hello?
Come again?
Would you say that the people who are working in the canteen, or like their work that they are doing is directly attributed to what we are existing for as the university? Right.
No.
Exactly. So you find that those people, their work, of course, is important, but you cannot really directly attribute it to its impact. Cannot actually be directly attributed, you know, to what we are doing. Okay. Yeah. So you can also have the other general overheads, such as the factory rent. Okay. You paying for the whole factory. You know, there are a lot of things happening in the factory. Maybe you're producing even different products, or you are having different services. Yeah. So looking at that cost, the rent that you pay, you cannot really say this rent has been incurred because of this product. Yeah. Like you can't really directly attribute that, because that same place can be used for other functions and other uses. Heating and lighting, still the same. And the management salaries, I've already commented on the management salaries as well. So all these are indirect costs. We'll talk about more of them now. I'll show you an example, the examples that we have. We have a lot of them. Actually, we can even pick another example. Let's pick an example of maintenance, right? Let's pick an example of maintenance and machinery. Now, when you pick an example of maintenance, like there are those people who are there to maintain, you know, just working in the, for example, in the university or in the company there. They're just there to make sure that they're doing some maintenance services. They just maintain anything, you know. you would not actually say that the cost that is incurred by that department is directly attributed to what we are doing. Even the cleaning. Every university has to be cleaned, right? For example, every company, there's those cleaning costs. The cleaning thing cannot really be directly attributed to what we are doing as a company. All those are examples of the indirect costs that should actually be brought to your attention. So now, the first part of your assignment is asking you to explain the 3 stages, or that the processes that are involved actually in overhead costing. Number 1, there is cost allocation. This is the first stage, and this is what you're going to write. I'm explaining right now. What is cost allocation? Cost allocation is the process by which the whole cost item are charged directly to the cost unit or the cost center, like the whole cost of the item. Let's say for the whole cost of the rent, because that's rent, is charged to the particular company, like the whole rent. Let's assume this company is renting the building or the factory. That's cost allocation. You get the whole cost and allocate it. You directly, charge the cost to the unit or to the center. That's overhead allocation. I'll give you a proper example so that you may get this properly. Then from here, there is the overhead apportionment. This is very important. You need it. Overhead apportionment, which is actually a stage which follows after you have allocated, is a process of sharing out the general overhead cost to beneficially cost centers on fair basis, such as the following. And this is the striking point. You need to get this one. Actually, the thrust of this thing that we are doing now. Listen carefully, because if you don't get the basis of allocation, this basis of apportionment, then you're most likely not to get the whole question, like first part of the question. This is where it is. When you're doing the apportionment, which is the process of sharing this general overhead cost to the beneficiary cost centers, you need to use some basis of apportionment. And the following are some of the common basis of apportionment that I will discuss. Of course, even the previous lecture that I will share with you again, I explained a lot of more than 20 different overhead costs and the common basis of apportionment that you actually can use. So, but I'll still go through them one more time. Let me explain like someone who knows what he's saying. Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example that you can easily relate with. You know the University of Zambia, for example. Let us assume that the University of Zambia were renting, right? Let us look, assume or suppose that imagine that they were renting. And now the whole rent costs, let's say maybe it's 100,000. Let's say it's just $100,000. Yeah, just that. And then this costs when it comes from the landlord, okay? The landlord just says, Unza, this is how much you're going to be charged. This is your total bill on the rent. You get the point? $100,000. And when it comes as 100,000. Now I want you to get it properly. Then you and I know that Unza has got more than 12 schools, over 13 schools within the university, right? We have got the School of Education, the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, the School of Natural Sciences, the School of Engineering, the School of Agricultural Sciences, the School of Law, the School of Mining. Okay, there are just many schools. That's the point. Now, all those schools, including the Graduate School of Business, GSB. Now, all those schools, right, they occupy a certain area in the university, right? There's a certain area that they are occupying. So now, imagine the Unza management says, no, we cannot just be paying this whole cost of $100 without knowing how each of us as the schools are using this area space. I want you to get to this one clearly. So the university instead says, no, actually, we are going to share these total costs, okay? This $100,000, we're going to share it. How are we going to share it? We'll share it in different schools so that each school can participate, contribute something. Since these schools, they just act independent, they make their own money, they do their own things. Yeah, but they're within the university. Okay, that's what happens. So now, the question is, what happens? How do we share? That's the question. How are we going to be sharing with these other schools? Are we going to use to share according to the number of students each school has? Or are we going to share according to the area space occupied by each school? Are we going to share according to the number of bulbs that are there in each school for lighting? I've given these three bases, a number of students, or number of employees, whatever you want to say. Just from your own thinking, What do you think would be the most appropriate basis of sharing this cost for rent? This is a rental cost. Anybody, what do you think would be the most appropriate basis to apportion this, cost?
I think for me, the best is the number of students each school has.
Remember, this is this is interesting. The number of students. Now, this is rental costs. We are paying for the land that we are occupying. You get it? We are paying for the land that we are occupying. This is the rental costs. I have heard already 2 submissions. What about any other? Do we have any other submission? Okay, let me just react on the 2. Look, we are paying for, the area occupied in the case. Yeah, I've heard this from Mr. Stula. Look, we are paying for the area occupied. This is rentals. We are paying for rentals. Look, some schools can occupy a bigger space, but they have got few students. And this actually happened at the University of Zambia in the recent year, actually in the past 4 years, it has been happening, whereby the School of Education has been occupying a bigger area space, but what has happened is that the number of students has declined in the recent past because many people, have not wanted to study education things, things related to education. Right. This is what has happened. But the area space occupied is bigger, but the number of students is small. So in this case, the most appropriate basis of apportionment we would use is actually the what? Is the area occupied. So we'll count how much of the area each school is occupying, and then we'll say, now this is where you should get it from, for us to allocate properly. We'll count how many, how much of the area, let's say this school occupies 2,500 meters squares, just an example, over the total area occupied by the whole university. Let's say the university is occupying 80,000, area space, square meters. Then you take the ratio, right? Take the ratio. Whatever the ratio you get, then multiply by what? Multiply by $100,000, the total cost of rent. It will give you how much that school, which is occupying the area of 2.5, is supposed to pay. You didn't get this one. Let me repeat one more time. So it's about how much area that universities or that school is occupying in the context of that I've given you, of the example I've given you, divided by the total area occupied by the whole school. All that multiplied by the what? The costs that you are sharing. That will give you exactly how much that school is supposed to do it, to donate or to give, contribute. So far, are you okay with that example?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in short, there are different bases of apportionment or allocating of these costs, that you should actually understand understand properly. So you should choose the most relevant. Usually in an exam, they will not give you, this is the trick part of it. In an exam, you may not be given the basis of apportionment, but you have to use your knowledge, right, that you have learned from here. What could be the most appropriate when you just look at the cost itself? You should know what could be the most appropriate. So now, I gave you an example. When the cost came, number one, the cost came as a whole. That process of allocating the $100,000 is called the allocation. That's first step. It's called cost allocation. Okay? That was cost allocation. But after you have started sharing now this cost in 2 schools, right? Using the same example I've given you that you can easily relate with, sharing in 2 schools, right? That is called what? That is called now apportionment. You're apportioning the cost. Now, get it from me that some of those schools, right? Or some of those departments, they may not be the production departments. Now get it very clear from here. So when you're allocating the costs, you just allocate the cost or apportion the costs. You'll apportion the cost to all the departments, whether the department is a service department or is a factory or production department. My statements are very much calculated. You have to pay attention. I am repeating. Listen carefully. I am saying that when you are doing the apportionment, you just apportion, to all the departments, regardless of the nature of the department, whether the department is a service department or maybe it's a supporting department. You don't care whether it's a supporting department or is a production department. Then at the end of it all, after you have done the apportionment, such that even the services departments have received the total cost that is due to them, you should find the means of getting all that cost that you had apportioned to the service departments and have that cost go to the production departments. The message is ultimately all the costs should go to where? To the production department at the end of it all. So the process of getting now these costs that you had allocated to the service departments into the production departments is what is called cost reapportionment. Cost reapportionment. That is actually the last, process that you do. Cost reapportionment. Maybe you may not understand what I'm trying to say when I say the service department. Service departments I'm referring to, there are those departments that are not really production department, but they're just there to support, the operations or the production department, such as canteen, right? When you go to the canteen, like, there's some companies that have canteens around, like when you go to the canteen, what it does is it's just there to support the production process. It's a service department, right? But when we are allocating the cost, it may receive some costs. However, at the end of it all the cost that is in the canteen department must find itself in one of the production departments. That's called cost reapportionment. I've given you an example of a canteen. We can even have maintenance department. The maintenance department is also a service department, Let me give you another example. Any other example? Let me get it. I can give you, and give you. Share another example of a service department. I've given you two. Or do you share any other department of the company that you know that is just a supporting department, It's not really a production department. It's a, You can mention some departments. Okay, thank you. We have received the cleaning department from Mr. Stula. Thank you. Yeah, you know that cleaning is just a service department, right? It's just there as a service department, not really like it's a production, but unless the company is a cleaning company. If the company is a cleaning company that we are dealing with, then the cleaning department becomes a production department because that's what we are doing. But if it's not a cleaning company, then cleaning department is not really there, Okay, at least you've gotten. So these are the three. This is the first part of your assignment. Like these are the solutions that you answer, right? Cost allocation, cost apportionment, and cost reapportionment. You just explain these, then you should be able to get those marks that are allocated there. Now, still on cost apportionment. I'll give you this table. It's trying to show you the different types of overhead costs and the possible basis of apportionment, and you pay attention. The overheads such as rent, rates, heating, and lighting, depreciation of buildings or depreciation of factories, the most appropriate basis of apportionment used is the floor area occupied. Is that clear? So once you'll find these listed, rent, rates, heating, lighting, depreciation of the buildings. Once you meet those, just check on the basis of apportionment. If you find the basis of apportionment as the area floor space, the floor area occupied, please get that one. Don't even debate. Okay. What if you find now depreciation? If you find depreciation, insurance of equipment, depreciation of equipment, insurance of equipment, you use the cost or the net book value of the equipment, right? So just to check there on the basis of apportionment. By the way, the basis of apportionment you'll be given, but they will not specify this will be for this. They will just be mainly listed. So you should know which one is for which, okay? You can have the cost. Once you check if there is a cost of that asset or those equipments, then the cost of equipment should be used as the basis of apportionment. Does that help? Okay. Hello?
Yes,
Is
sir.
the class able to follow what the SAR is saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have personal office, canteen services, welfare, so wages and the cost offices, those things, first aid, among others. Those you use the number of employees, okay? Or if you have labor hours worked in each cost center, then you can use. Where you just have heating, lighting, then you can use the volume of the space occupied by each cost center. For example, lighting, you can use the volume of the areas occupied. If you say about electricity, you can have the basis, maybe it's about the kilowatts, or maybe you can have the bulbs that have been used for lighting. Use the most appropriate basis. That's the message you are communicating to you. Does that help?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's do this. Yeah, before we close the conversation. Let me just do this. So let's go back to our question. Have you seen our question? The way how it is. Have you seen the total cost, the indirect costs that need to be allocated? Yeah. There are indirect materials, rent here to be allocated, electricity is to be allocated, machine depreciation is to be allocated, indirect labor is also to be allocated. These, they have to be allocated. Okay. But the question of the day is, what could be the best basis of apportionment? Then there are these bases that you're given. This is your assignment. They are here. They are given down. Okay. There are these different bases of apportionment that you're given. Number of stores requisitions, number of staff. Are you going to do that by a number of staffs occupied by each department? Are you doing it by the area occupied? Are you doing it by the machine value? Obviously, you know that machine depreciation, I've said that you should use the net book value of the machine, of the equipment, isn't it? Indirect labor hours, maybe you can use that to allocate indirect labor. Kilowatt for which cost? Anybody? Which cost are you allocating by kilowatts? The cost that you're allocating is here on top. these costs are the ones that you are allocating to these departments, okay? But these are the basis of apportionments given to you. Which cost is most relevant to be apportioned by the kilowatt hours consumed?
Electricity.
Yeah, electricity. It is just that easy and very straightforward, as easy as ABC. So basically, this is what we are going to do. I was just trying to introduce you to the concept. So basically, the first part of the question was asking you, explain the 3 stages of overhead absorption. I've already explained. There are how many? There are 3. Number 1, cost allocation. 2, cost what? What follows after cost allocation?
Apportioning.
Yes, cost apportionment. And what's the last one?
Reapportionment.
Reapportionment. So it's just as easy as that basic. That's about the first 6 months. Then the second one, this one is about, this is where we need to do the reapportionment. To do this one, we have to do the reapportionment. Like, I'll show you how it is done. I've already demonstrated, but we'll still do a practical example. So when you do the example next time, you should be able to answer this first 20 marks. Like on your own, you should be able to do that. Then we can move on to the other part of the conversation. Right. Okay.